What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to romasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team.
Water and I'm just constantly swallowing my burps. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, we're live right now. We're live for the
sorry.
I was telling Wes, I thought I bought a case of regular water. It turned out to be sparkling.
Dude, it's one of the best mistakes you ever made. Sparkling water is amazing.
Sparkling water is good, but I do like there's something about it that just feels just unnecessary to me. So I do like sparkling water. I enjoy it if I'm out. It's like a good like festive kind of drink. But it's like on like the daily thirst quest mission, I'm always I just like regular water. And when I bought this, it's like, because the bubbles just like, they leave your body anyway. It's just a fleeting sensation. It's just you're tickling your throat and then you either burp it out or they just leave the bottle itself. I have a lot of thoughts about sparkling water. I drank a thing yesterday and I was just like, why do I need this sensation in my throat?
Yeah, to me it's slightly painful. Like if you get it in a good way, like I like it. If you get like a really cold sparkling water, it is semi-unenjoyable, but for some reason it makes it more enjoyable. I don't know why.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, dude, it's Monday, man.
Happy Monday, dude. Happy Monday, dudes.
Yeah, man. It's I feel like I just went through a wormhole all this weekend. Wow, Maya had 104 fever throughout the weekend. So it was 3 days. It was like started on, I don't know. I don't even know what day it started. Friday maybe, but we had to go. Long story short, their pediatrician was like, well, there's this MISC stuff, which is like the inflammatory response. Some very, very, very rare, very, very rarely children have from COVID, but it's also like nobody knows anything about it. Go get paneled for it. But when there isn't a viral infection, there's inflammatory markers anyway when they run blood.
Okay.
So they don't have it. They don't really know. It's like a precautionary thing. So they go to the hospital and like she does have inflammation. We got to do the next line of testing for all this COVID response stuff.
Okay.
That they were like just leads to organ failure sometimes, but they were like, but also probably not. And it's just like you're just sitting there like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? So long story short, she ended up just having 2 viruses at once. So thank God it's not the stuff they were worried about. But she does have a double virus.
Whoa.
Yeah, dude, and it's like it's been 104 fevers, like waking up to her at nighttime with like 104 and having to be like, all right, let's give this medicine, that medicine, because we got discharged. We got out, thank God, once they figured out what it was. But still, last night it's like 104 fever. Let's bring this thing down. The whole time I'm like, oh my, this must have been fucking terrifying in like the 1800s.
Oh.
So yeah, that's the weekend. We're still battling to bring that thing down. So that's been my primary focus right now.
Oh, dude, I'm so sorry for Maya. Also, like, can't get violently ill. Like a decent amount. Like, especially like stomach bugs. It seems like, oh my! I remember when I was a kid, I got used to get like a stomach bug. I felt like once every other year. I don't remember last time I got a stomach bug, but that seems awful.
Dude, it's crazy. I mean, she had that not too long ago. It's like you throw up like. They threw up like 16 times. It's just like, dude, what the fuck is this? Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
You just leave them in the bathtub?
No, you just you leave them with you and you bring a towel. So they just like puke on you and you just lay there and you're just like, all right, just put a towel down and just get, dude. The sense of being disgusted slowly just dissolves because it's like, I mean, after they shit on you once, you're like, all right. So then they just throw up on you. You just lay there with a towel over you. And it's like the first one that catches you off guard is just they just puke. Like I'll be holding her, and she's like blah. And you're just like, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
It's something else. It's something else. But yeah, that was the whole weekend. So trying to get that situated, everything down. I will say though, it's been an exercise in patience though, because it's like, dude, I was up till like 3:30 in the morning, and it's just like this kid's sick. They're like, you need a rest. And they're just like, bah. And you're like, you need a rest. And it's just like, it's a supreme exercise in patience of like, I'm going to put you in your bed. I know you're going to get up. You're going to start like kicking the rails of your little toddler bed. Then you're going to smack me in the face. Then you're going to like try to get out of bed. And you have to pick them up over. It's like, if you getting angry doesn't really help. So you have to just pick them up, lay them back down, like, all right. And you have to like come up with like, you have to slowly break their will over the course of a couple hours. And you can do it quickly if you just hold them down, like, shut the fuck up. But, you know, that doesn't really work, I would say, in the long term. So that's been an interesting practice of patience. Also, Wes, I think your thing just cut out a second ago. Put your foot down situations are always kind of nice. And I will say, again, yes, the group often does lend itself. It lends a sort of resolve to people individually that I wouldn't have personally. I was telling Wes when we got done the whole thing last week, I told you guys I was already in hot water. I was on the bad boy I was on the naughty boy list, and I was able to like just jump out of this meeting fully equipped, had thought everything out, blah blah blah, blah, and then just jumped into a hash out with my wife. One of those conversations that's like, all right, you both of you on the phone are like, hey, and it's like it's time, you know, when you call someone, there's like good shit to discuss. Hey. So we hashed it out beautifully, and it was just because honestly I just walked through all of this stuff, and it was like that was nice. So I'll say too, there was somebody who said in that regard, Wes, you froze again. There's somebody who said in that regard too of like there's like this first level, and this is true for me. I don't know if it's true for everyone else, but I find there's a confrontation, there's a problem in a relationship, then there's the anger clash. And like once, if you can disarm the anger of the situation, find out like what am I concerned about? What are you concerned about? And let's hash those concerns out. And the number one thing too is like that helped me on that last thing was just like she was mad because I was like I guess I'm being dismissive right now, but I was being kind of dismissive or kind of like you know, just whatever. But there was a dynamic that I just apologized. I was like, look, I am fully sorry for that. My bad. I fully take ownership of that. My bad. Here's what I'm worried about. It's like, oh, why don't you just say that? And it's like, I don't know, man. I wish, you know, I don't know. I wish I could communicate perfectly in real time, but it was good. The whole thing was good. Once that fight can rage on. If I'm like, fuck that, I'm not apologizing because you did something that I'm pissed off about. The fight can rage on indefinitely. But if I'm like, look, I own that. That's fully my bad. I'm sorry. But here's where I'm coming from. You know, and it solved. Literally, it was the exact antidote for the problem. So.
And Matt, can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull over in a parking lot so I don't go through in and out of areas of reception. Yeah, and what Matt and I were talking about prior to the podcast, and Matt, I appreciate you reaching out to me that day when you resolved that conflict. And here's the cool thing I think about the group. Like, neither Matt nor myself nor anyone else in the group acts like a guru. So life is not this rosy thing. It's like we're all trying to figure this shit out together. With that being said, I am constantly toggling back and forth with like, is marriage worth it? Do I want this? Like, am I just going along with, just going along with it because society tells me to? And I don't do that in any area of my life. And I'm not going to do that in the biggest area of my life. And I was having this conversation with the girl that I'm dating recently over the weekend. And a couple things came up. Actually, on Friday, we went out to dinner and her friend was there. Matt, that's why I texted you saying, hey, do you ever fight with your brothers or do your brothers ever fight with you? Like that sort of thing. Right. Because I was getting access into what Matt calls girl world. And,
I do call it that.
And dude, like, because this one girl was dealing with the conflict with her friend. And I said, hey guys, like, I'm just curious, like, are you always in some sort of conflict? Like in your friend group, is there always at least one or two, or maybe more than that, conflicts within your friends' overall friend circle? And the answer was basically yes. And now it's like, and I want to say, like, the girls that I was sitting with, highly educated, super smart, like, and I mean that sincerely, right? Like, it seems like A+ players in the girl arena, or just in the human arena.
Sure.
But like, so, and then I said, I don't know, like, let me tell you about my buddy Matt. I don't think we've ever fought. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah, I don't think we ever have. Maybe one time, like, we nitpicked over like a video game, like in college. I can't remember if that was the case, right? Like,
sure.
Like, because we used to play Mario Kart a lot. So like, I'm sure we all like said like, fuck you or something like that. But outside of Mario Kart, I can't think of anything, that like, and the one girl told me, she's like, well, this is the text that I sent to my friend, and I'm not sure if this is a conflict. And I read the text, I was like, that's for sure a conflict. Never once have I texted Matt saying like, hey man, like, can we talk about, like, you kind of made me feel this way, like, last week, and like, it's just not sitting well with me. Like, if you have to say it's not sitting well with me, that's the gateway drug into a conflict. Then the subsequent text, I'm like, yeah, you for sure are in a confrontation with this person.
Sure.
So anyway, that leads me, then like we ended up talking to this girl the other day, and we talked about sort of need cycles and expectation cycles. So we were just having an open discussion, and it was like, she's like, hey, it doesn't seem like you need to have, like, it doesn't seem like you need another person. I was like, I said, no, number one, I don't think that's true. But number two, thank you. That does seem like a compliment. I kind of feel like it's how humans should be, where like it should seem that I don't need to depend on anyone else, and vice versa, because it seems to me that is the most rational way of going about it. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want another person in my life or people in my life, but it feels to me like it's nice to have a wanting to have, rather than I have this void that needs to be filled. Even though I think her presumption is incorrect. I do think I need somebody. What I need is like the love, the nurture, like the nurturing, the love, the affection, and so on. Like, I think that's the need. I think that's the underlying need that I have. But I don't need you to do my dishes. I don't need you to fucking wash my clothes. I don't need you to lean on in a bunch of other ways, because I can handle my own shit, right? Like, and I kind of feel like everyone else should too. And that got me to this place of like, damn man, like, I don't know, like, do I want to be married? Do I, because she was talking about her needs cycles, and it was great to have a conversation outside of a conflict. And we got to, like, I was like, oh, okay, like, some people like 0 dishes in the sink, and some people like washing the dishes every couple days. Well, the person who likes washing who wants 0 dishes in the sink will be perpetually upset, because their dish cycle is faster than the person who doesn't like to wash dishes every day. Yeah. So similarly, if someone's need cycle is faster than their counterpart, then the person who goes faster will be perpetually upset if the other person doesn't catch up, if that makes sense. So if she needs affection once a day, and I don't provide that once a day, because my needs affection cycle is once every, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, whatever that is, assuming they're the same needs. Let's just say that even though that's not the case. I don't know, man. It seems difficult.
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. But I also think there's sometimes a more simplistic kind of, I'm not going to say subtext to all this stuff, but there's really the other thing of like, like, I mean, I'm a pretty low maintenance person in general. Like, I can kind of go, days, weeks, months without like, I mean, it's weird. I say that, but then when I'm single, from when I remember, I'm always kind of like, I don't want to be by myself right now. That I would say that would be a need, to some extent.
Totally. That's what I mean by like the affection. Like, it seems like a lot of guys are searching for a hangout buddy. Like, I don't really need you to do any of my stuff. Like, it'd just be cool to hang out.
Yeah, and that's the problem though, because I think they, this is as fucked up as this might sound. That like, and this is something I've had to come to terms with. It's like they want to genuinely be your friend as well. So there's like, because I've done the same thing where I silo girls into like you're here for like stuff, really, like I girlfriend stuff, and like they want to be friends, and I think there's something I'm fucked up in that regard, where I'm just kind of like, no, you're my girlfriend, like that's stay over there, and girlfriend stuff.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think a lot of this can be addressed by just like accepting the fact that, or accepting people for just how they are to some extent. Now, there's a part where that becomes untenable, 100%. But there's also, I think, a lot to be learned and gained from being like, look, this is the way you are. I'm just going to accept it, and also I'm going to accept myself for the way I am, and this is just how I am. But I don't know. I feel like there's like a whole. Like, especially after you have kids, a lot, in my opinion, again, this is just, I'm spitballing, but there's so much stuff of a relationship that's just like, we're going to make each other happy. And then then there's like, but then we have kids. Then there's a part of the relationship of like, what kind of kid raising team do we make? And it's like that. It's so hard to distinguish like what part of the relationship is like us being buddy, us being sexually attractive, us being, attracted to each other. There's so many different dimensions. But then like the ultimate question is like, do you want kids together? Because from what I'm experiencing, it's a totally different thing. And then it's like, a lot of the other stuff kind of falls by the wayside. I don't know if I'm not being like negative at all. I think it's a good thing, but yeah, it's very difficult. And this is the one book I was reading talks about this, about how we have such a plethora of choice that it's like, it's hard to really commit one way or the other. Cause it's like, well, I could also just do this, or I could also just do this. So yeah, it's definitely a pickle, man. It's a serious pickle. And it's like, it's one of those things. It's like, in terms of having kids, everyone just mindlessly, in my opinion, goes, "Oh, when are you guys having kids? Like, you have some kids, blah blah blah." And it is it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But Jesus Christ, is it a battleground as well? So it's like it's a very, it's a very heavy, intense experience, and I think it's a beautiful one. But it's one of those things where it's like, if you want them, you have to have them. There's no way, in my opinion, to optimize or be like, there's just going to be parts of it that are an absolute motherfucker and like an intense experience. It's a wormhole that, like, if you're on the periphery, you're like, yeah, if I just do this and I just do that, it's like, you're getting sucked into the wormhole. If you want to get sucked into the wormhole, and you're going to be in the wormhole. That's my opinion. There's an extent to where optimization is fantastic, and then there's in my opinion, there's an extent to where it can become, the paralysis from analysis thing, where it's like, you're either in the water or out of the water. And it's like, because then there's like the burning thing of like, well, I don't want to regret not having them. And then it's like, so it's like, it's difficult, dude. It's and I don't say this to be like one's better than the other. It's like, no, I think everything should be custom tailored. I think everyone should custom tailor their life as much as possible. I totally agree with that. Yeah. But it's like, man, just when people are like, oh man, when are you having kids? Like, now that I have them, I'm like, you just go around casually signing people up for that? Like, it's fucking insane, dude. It's, dude. It's a beautiful. Same thing with marriage. Yeah, exactly. I've taken everything all my major milestones, like, almost pathologically lightly, to where I was like, whatever. I'll just do it. But again, it's like, and you can go through, I know people, you go through your whole life like that, just being like, that's just how it is. And, blah, 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 blah. But if you really kind of try to contact the depth of the situation, like the mission you're doing with like your spouse or your kid, like, you can just say, I have kids. Everyone has kids. Hey, what's up? There's my kid. Or you can be like, I'm ushering another human being into the future and like trying to bestow them with as much love and all. It gets really deep and demanding. So the whole point of the ramble is like really nailing that question down. And then I think it helps to enter relationships with that. Like, I know that, and again, that's like a tough ask, but I think that simplifies relationships a lot. Because it's like Louis C.K. talks about that a lot. He's like, as soon as I had kids, I looked at my wife like, oh my God, I could have just broke up with you. I could have totally broke up with you before this. Like, that would have been nothing. He's like, I was like, why did I even listen to you? I had no reason to listen to you back then. But it's like, it is very funny. But yeah, man, I mean, dude, I just try to save people from my unthinking hell when I just jump into shit. And it's like, and I do, I'm happy with everything. But it's like, I just look back and laugh on my mom would always get on my ass about this, because I'd be like, I don't know. We'll find out. I'll just do it. We'll find out. She's always like, what? Like, that's a terrible way to go about it. It's like, I don't know. But I will say, it's like, I'm a big one for eye openers, and it's like, that's a big question. Like, if you're planning on having kids, because there is, and again, I'd love to hear other people's opinion, or Wes, what you think about this, but it's like I feel like there's an almost unavoidable element of sacrifice. Like, something's getting lopped off the top, like sleep, regardless, like something will. And again, maybe there's a way to, buttress yourself from that. If you had enough resources where you can outsource that totally, but then it runs the risk of like, you have these super wealthy people who like just someone else totally raises their kid. They just like pay someone to totally raise their kid for them. So there is like a fine, there is a middle ground. Because there's like, people who like are raised by a nanny their whole life, then go to boarding school, and their like parents are just like people, I guess, who are like in their house.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is, I will say definitely, if you do have a couple extra bucks, good Lord, there's some things you can do to really take a lot of the heat off of it, for sure. But it's like, you can overdo that too. Like I go to my daycare and I see like infants in there crying, and I'm like, and the place is kind of expensive. So I'm like, I know you guys, one of you two can afford to stay home. So I'm like sitting there like, and it's like as soon as you walk in, it's just, in my head, I'm just like, oh my God, this is terrifying. So yeah, and again, nothing's right. No, again, I don't want to like say like, if you're doing that, you're wrong, but that's just like something that goes through my head. And it's like, where do you strike the balance between like, I need my life, but also like, if I do that too much, obviously that can be a slippery slope.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how can I say this? I like the fact that I'm going through it because I know I'm not being a sleaze bag. I'm not just trying to be off like on some playground eternally. And I can speak to it's like, no, like I'm legitimately like, for me, I do struggle, go back and forth of when this girl and I were talking about her need cycles versus my need cycles. And then from my research in marriage, it seems like marriage was not always a thing. It seems like child rearing for a large percentage of human history, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but my perception was a community-based thing. So there were teams of people raising children.
Sure.
And marriage, it seems like, stemmed from something that was purely basically economical, not spiritual, and then it became spiritual, which that's more of a turnoff for me, just in general. Like, and then I do see kind of a lot of misery, right? and I would almost have a hypothesis that, okay, so let's say this: if I were to get married, I'd have to get extremely clear on what it seems to me most people just like you say, Matt, treat very casually. Like they read their vows, and it seems like they just took their vows, like they just like made it up and it was just meant to sound romantic, or they just took it from society scripting. So like I would need to have a contract, and I think that might sound unromantic and it might sound non-spiritual, but that contract would be so unbelievably specific and to be reviewed on a frequent basis. Like this is the only rational way that I personally can feel like comfortable with it. And maybe I meet that girl that says, "Oh, screw the contract. I don't care." But to me, it's like, okay, we can totally raise kids and let's sign up for whatever year, however many years that contract would be. I just don't see it as, well, that means I've got to be with you for 60 years. Like where did we jump from 18 years or whatever that is to like, I need to be with you my entire life. And I obviously don't need to be with you my entire life because almost everyone that I see around me has either gotten divorced or is divorced, right? Like, so It's like, so please don't tell me like, oh, it's this thing. It's like, well, the majority of society is doing it wrong. So like before we even say like, oh, that's how you should do it, let's realize that the majority of people are doing it wrong. Plus, if you add in or have done it wrong, plus when you add in the amount of people who stay married just because God said so or whatever the reason is, who are not happy. Like it just doesn't feel right to me. And also, it also seems like if you had that sort of contract in place of like, no, this is not till death do us part. Let's be very clear. Let's be very, very clear. This is not till death do us part. You could go off the rails and I'm leaving, right? And like, or I could go off the rails and you should totally leave, right? Like if I get some sort of crazy drug habit, you should be out of here. Like day 2,
Sure.
Once you hear it. So
what would you say about like illness? What about like illness?
Yeah, well, I think illness for me, there would be no flight risk. I don't think like for me of illness, I'd imagine if my partner ever got ill, like I'd probably be more in than I was the day prior. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking purely about like, oh, okay, like if your needs just exceed what I'm willing to give you at some point, whatever, like I can't, I just want to always be able to tell you I can't give you that. Illness and anomalies aside. And I do sincerely mean that. I think if my partner, if any of my friends or my mom got ill, like I'd be there fucking forever, For
sure.
This is more of like, hey, you're not going to make my life hell. And I don't plan on making your life hell. And if we ever do that to each other, you can hang in there for a certain amount of days. But if it becomes a situation where it's just pure misery, I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and you should be done with me. And I think Matt, you and I growing up have probably seen families that, or parents that have stayed together, and they for sure should not have stayed together, but they were just staying together because society told them they should have this eternal bond. I can name 5 families right now where their
Sure.
parents were just miserable, you know?
Absolutely.
So
no, that's true. Now, the one thing I'll say to that, and the thing too, back then too, especially, I really feel for, you know, people who had to grow up in like the 60s, 70s, 50s, you know, whenever, because it's like their resources around like conflict management, it was just non-existent, dude. Like there was no education around it. And I do think, and this is something that I think about a lot. So, and it is an issue of balance. And again, there's nothing like, there's some people who just can go perverse into like the suffering realm of things. Like, this is just how it is, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's necessarily the right approach. Although I do think there can be, if you're obviously if you're with the right person, there can be something rewarding and personally transformative of going through those initial kind of like ugly headbutting and bouts of misery, because a lot of times, as annoying as it is, it does kind of bring up something within you that's potentially could be altered and give you a better life, if that makes sense. That's totally. My experience. That's my experience. Fucking pissing me off, this and that. You talk. Then she hits that one thing on you, and you go, "Fuck, that's kind of true. That is something I didn't realize I was doing." So, and again, it's like how to know if you're actually doing that versus you're just two people being miserable forever. That the problem is you can't really tell unless you have some time and you can kind of look back and go, actually, that was kind of for the best in this regard, blah, 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 blah. So I will say I do genuinely think that there is something to be had for like plodding through the more miserable marshes. And again, you're hoping jointly that like there is going to be kind of a dawn that breaks through that. And obviously, like Wes, you're totally right. For a lot of people, that doesn't exist, or they just can't access. There's not access to that, and a lot of that I think comes from a stripping away of certain unhelpful aspects of the self that are kind of illuminated through that conflict. That you go, oh, okay, like you're still on some mega bullshit, but yes, you're right. I should try to stop doing that, but it's so hard because you can't see it by yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
So it's like there is that, but again, it is real conflict. I don't want to make any of this sound kind of sugary or like, and then you all live happily. I don't know. You might not, or the person might get cancer and die. That's like life gets incredibly fucked up as you get older, in my opinion. But it also kind of can get simpler. So yeah, man. I mean, this was the stuff I shrugged off forever. I was like, whatever. But as you get older, it's like the shit gets way more fucking intense. So yeah, it's tough, man. But again, it's all. I don't like to be prescriptive at all because everything should be people should definitely custom tailor their lives as much as possible. But that's something I'll say, having been in 2 long-term relationships that were, supposed to be for the long term. The first marriage I completely fucked up because I was too immature. This one I'm really trying to cultivate the necessary resources and like going through the stuff to make it work. And I will say that it has been rewarding. It's supremely challenging on both ends. But it's like, what is the thing? It's kind of like none of us can glimpse into what elder bachelorhood would look like, and I get the sense that it would also.
I mean, it looks like a widow. It looks like a surviving spouse.
Yeah, and again that's again I agree with you, Wes, though, where it's like, don't just grab onto someone out of fear for dying alone. I don't think that's a good thing either. I think you should. I think you're 1,000% right of like. Cultivate the inner resources so that like I am a self-contained unit. We can have a good life together. But again, there is like, even if you have 2 of the most, I would say like educated, refined, self-contained units, there's going to be that like kind of, that kind of heating up as you kind of enter each other's atmosphere. That's just going to happen where there's going to be certain things that come up and like, that's fucking the bullshit. This is that, blah, blah, blah. But I would say, and again, when you take marriage out of the spiritual context, it's like, yeah, like it's just then happiness becomes the ideal. And it's like, well, fuck it. If I'm not happy, then what the fuck's the point? And it's like, well, yeah, there is larger points, but it's like when you pop it out of that other one, it's like, can we have kids together? What would that look like? What do we want our kids to believe? What kind of people do we want to put in the world? But when it's just like, I want to feel good doing this. It's like, that's one dimension that's important. That kind of is like your guiding star for like, should I do this? Should I do that? But when it becomes, in my opinion, the utmost, most important, that can become a tough thing to chase, because it just gets, harder and harder to attain. It can, at least.
Yeah.
But we're also so I didn't mean to cut you off, but I will say this. We're in a period of very shifting times, and like the things that worked before, where you were like trying to drive the 1952 Buick of marriage into like different times. And it's like, yeah, I think there should be tons of adaptation and change. So I do applaud that as well. It's just the thing I'm trying to drive home is like, when you tread these paths that are a little more untrammeled upon, you are dealing with big time unknowns. And it's, it's like, as you should, but it's like, it's a very heavy situation.
Yeah. Because I think, man, and this is why it's great we're talking about this. I don't think we can have a discussion on marriage, or anybody can have a discussion on marriage before saying, okay, let's look at how it's actually going. Because the discussion of marriage oftentimes is completely divorced, no pun intended, completely divorced of what actually is occurring right now. Like, what is actually occurring right now is divorce. It's worse than a coin toss. Which, if I were to say to you, like, hey, let's toss a coin, let's see how this works out, like, that's not a good thing, right? Like, let's take an airplane, up in the sky, and let's flip a coin, see if we get on the other side, right?
Sure.
Like, and so for the most important decision right now, the outcomes right now in society in America are worse than a coin toss, like, literally. And that's a problem, right? That's a real problem. So we can't start the conversation without first recognizing that the current model, whatever that model technically is by definition failing more times than it's working. Now, and that's if we measure strictly by divorce. If we then measure by, like, whatever we want to call it, happiness, and I know that can become an argument itself. It's like, well, is life meant to be happy? It's like, well, I think a certain percentage of life is meant for happiness, right? Like, especially if there's a choice. Particularly those suffering tend to make the argument against not being happy. It's like, I think if humans had a choice, it's like, yeah, I'd prefer to be happy to the fullest extent that's possible. So then if we add on couples who are just miserable, we're now definitely talking way more than a coin toss. Like, it's the current situation is by definition, in my opinion, failing. There's no statistical argument against it. At least from my understanding. But then it's like, if we remove the marriage, like, let's say we remove the nucleus of talking about the topic of marriage, and we talk about something else where you're taking away, or it's similar type of infrastructure. So for instance, if I were to look at the executives of Amazon.com, and I take those same people, those same executives, and I put them in the university system where they have tenure, there's not a single person that I know, like on the, let's say, the finance side, that thinks that tenure is a good thing. Right? Like not a single person. Or if they put them in the government, which is very similar to tenure, like where there's borderline no repercussion, there's no performance evaluations, like there's nothing that you have to do. Like there's almost nothing you do except for extreme things to get fired. There's not a single person that I know on the capitalism side or the finance side that says tenure's a good thing, or government like guaranteed working is a good thing. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So you take those same humans, you put them inside of a high performing company where they're held accountable, where there's real consequences to not performing, where there's real consequences to not showing up every day like you want to fucking be there, or like you have to earn your spot. Right? So it's like, so to me, I like that model. I like incentive-based structures, like what you and I have talked about, Matt, in the past. Showing up with a positive attitude is part of your fucking job description. If you're not going to do it, you're gonna be ousted out of here. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know why we can have that type of seriousness or accountability inside of our working infrastructure, and not necessarily have it, or at least the way that I see it, not necessarily have it inside of the most important relationship there is. So why do we have it inside of our working relationship, but we don't have it inside of our most important relationship? Like, I get kind of lost in that.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I think it's fair, and it's all, it's fair, and it's very logical. It's just like the problem, I think, just comes into, again, where is, like, women are looking for security, and when you start every single condition you add upon that, I think makes them nervous.
Yeah.
And it's I totally agree. It's very annoying. It's like, yeah, we should have proper attitudes every day. We should, we shouldn't like get lost in our emotions, all that stuff. It's just, I think I think it's like, I think what you're saying is echoing into eternity from every dude. I think maybe who ever lived to be like, could you not, could you fucking not,
Yeah.
please?
Right.
But yeah, it's just, again, I'm not like, I don't want you to think I'm like railing against your
No,
your
no,
kind
dude,
of
I love
view.
the
I just,
conversation.
the thing that really kind of pops up for me is like, especially with the marriage stuff, is like, yeah, man, you can go back and look, like, it used to also be too, like, women kind of just died in childbirth, like, a lot. So like a dude would have like typically a couple wives throughout his lifetime if he didn't die first. So it was very much more it was very much more needs based, and like you were saying, it was a lot of times it was based on like living off of like the land with like an extended kind of kinship with like cousins, family, other people who like lived in your certain area and all played a proper function. And then like you were saying, Wes, like you could go out, there was like there was a whole group of people to like help raise kids and help raise each other's kids and kind of do it collectively rather than under this kind of like, like I got to get up and go to work and I'm going to pay this person to do it in this place that is paid to watch them, and I'll come back and maybe I'll see my wife for like 30 minutes and we'll both go to sleep.
Yeah.
So, and then again, it's like, and it's all under the context of like, and we all just want to be happy and blah, 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 blah. And I don't think that's like, I don't say like, oh, we should go back to the days when we were like terrified by priests and all of that stuff. Because I think that was terrible too, when it was like you had these guys looming over you, like, you're going to go to fucking hell if you don't give us money, which is like terrible as well. But I do wonder sometimes if the abysmal divorce rate is just indicative also of like you can say the same thing of like, depression, anxiety, all of that skyrocketing, and it's like,
oh, totally.
And that there's like a weird relation between GDPs of countries and the higher rates of depression. And it's like, obviously it would suck to live in the third world and depression isn't even a thing because it's like, you're just genuinely probably terrified all day. You're living in like conditions where like your mortality's threatened. So it's like, you don't have time to be like,
yeah. For measuring whether or not you're like,
yeah, for sure. So it's like, I don't know. That's something I think about a lot of like, how do you keep the kind of cream from the, let's say, contemplative spiritual traditions? How do you keep the cream without all the weird guilt, shame, blah, 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 the stuff that really kind of invigorated people? And then how do you also like not have everything in your life sanitized by kind of like scientific principles, reason, et cetera? Because there's just certain things of your life that are just irrational and illogical that like if you hold too much light up to them, it kind of turns them into something like sterile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing for me is like, number one, marriage. Like a lot of people tend to argue for marriage. And it's like, well, it's the thing. It's like, wait a second, actually humans, just so everybody knows, like it was not a thing, right? Like, and the definition of it has changed dramatically over time. So like like we just kind of, Matt, like you just illustrated, it was once not at all for the reason that it is today. So the reason that you're arguing today is just I'm not saying you, Matt, but I'm saying the version of marriage everybody's arguing, a lot of people are arguing for today, was not the actual thing that it was created for. So it's like, so there's not just some profound, like majestic, eternal reason when it's relatively new, like for humans, Then the only thing that I disagree with you, Matt, on your points was like, dude, you're being very humble and nice when you say your first marriage didn't work out because you were too immature. I call complete bullshit on that. I know the situation, at least to the best extent that I could. You had every right to get divorced. Like,
no, for sure,
like
for sure,
100%. And that's my point. It's like, I know this person, no disrespect towards her, but the situation you were put in, it's like she was not holding up her end of the bargain. Period. Yeah. Right. Period. And so it's like, and in my opinion, you made the rational decision. Now, I would also argue that if society did a better job of teaching us to create a better contract, either that marriage would have not happened or she would have performed better. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's been very crystal clear. Here is what I expect of you as a partner, right? So I'll give an example. I know this couple who's married. The guy is amazing. I've worked with him. Like, awesome personality in work. Awesome personality. When he goes home, just a complete grump fest. Yeah. And I don't think it's anything to do with his wife. Like he's just a grumpy dude. It's like, okay, dude, how can you turn on the charm And how can you turn on the friendliness in work when you're being paid to, and where you know that you'll just be fired if you don't? But when you go home, your kids and your wife know you as like this guy. Oh, that's just him. You know, it's like, well, that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, literally, there's something there. There's something. It's the same human, different dynamic, and he's responding to the different dynamic in a positive way. There's something off there. So
Sure.
that's where I just struggle, man. And I think we probably all have examples of that. It's like, oh, like, how can this person be so great over in this area, but then they treat me like garbage, or vice versa? Like, there's something fucking off there, man. Something's way off.
No, for sure. And the thing I always say about for the first marriage thing is really just I just blame myself in terms of like not lacking the self-knowledge, lacking the kind of maturity of the situation, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, of course, it was like, you know, when things are wrong. And again, I am not,
They were
like,
wrong.
I'm not advocating
wrong,
for people to like just suffer forever for no reason, especially when like everything's been tried and you're just like, I'm not, there's no signal telling me that like anything's going to alter. Once you realize like, all right, this is untenable, it's, whatever. But again, I will say there's something to, like, if you go on Tinder, in my opinion, there's something bleak about like the marketization of like the dating world. It became
totally.
kind of marketized, and it's like these things like, and it's not like a push against like I don't think logic applies or like incentives or stuff, but there's certain this is just my feeling that there's certain areas when that kind of encroaches into it can kind of make things like kind of bleak or just kind of like, and again, I don't want to romanticize the past, because it's like
Totally.
two people living off the land in fear for their lives was probably fucking, there's all kinds of problems with that as well. I catch myself trying to I try not to romanticize the past too much, but it's like, and I do agree with you of like, there has to be a way to set this up in a way that's not as like, like half of marriages shouldn't fail. Like that's bad. That's a bad thing.
Right.
Clearly something's amiss. And my kind of question, the one that I ask all the time, is like, how much of this is based on, let's say, like the failure of like the system not matching its time? How much of it is the stuff from the time creeping into that kind of relationship? And it's like, I don't know. But it's it's very tough. And I will say the thing that really helps is like the better you know yourself, the easier, I would say. It's still very difficult and challenging, but the easier it becomes, because you're just assured in being like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. Here's why. And I can specifically say, because here's what I want. And it's clearly, it's not matching up to that. But again, there is stuff to be had from hashing that out and then entering into kind of a more secure space. Ideally, it's just like, like when you say like more than half don't work out, the other, I mean, dude, I don't know if like even just, I just watch people like grocery shopping together, and I see just like everyone's grumpy. But I also feel like that is also, I think what I'm trying to reach at, that kind of, whatever that is, that blanket kind of like dysphoria that a lot of people have in the modern world, goes beyond marriage, in my opinion. That's like, people just getting married within the context of people being kind of like miserable and overwhelmed for whatever reason. I think that has something to do with it as well. But
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, because again, like anxiety's up, depression keeps rising, and all this stuff, and it's like there's like, I don't know, 30% of people are on depression medicine. So it's like, and then there's all the people who aren't taking it, who are still kind of bummed out for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, well, that's, in my opinion, an even bigger topic, where it's like, well, why is everyone so miserable, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I think, I think for marriage, and we'll have to unpack this more, because it helps me like to banter and to go back and forth.
For sure.
Because man, it just seems to me that I need to more precisely define what that is, and what the obligations are. Because I will say that I also talked to a marriage therapist recently, just in a casual conversation. And by the way, this is a Catholic marriage therapist. And so I was talking to her, and she said, I was like, is there no reason for divorce? She's like, no, there's totally reason for divorce. So I was like, oh, okay. We should talk about that. Like, people should fucking talk about that, because that's not what the vows say, right? The vows do not say that. The vows say literally, till death do us part. You know what that means? Until we're dead, we're staying together. That's what that technically means. That is literally what those words mean. So so now that I'm talking to a Catholic marriage therapist, right? It's like, can't we let that get out into society? Like, hey, by the way, it doesn't actually mean that. Like, here's what it actually means. There are these categories in which you should get divorced. Okay, well, let's have an open discussion about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stop pretending that it's this magical thing that we say, nope, until you're a corpse and until I'm a corpse, or both a corpse at the same time, that's when we're done. And I feel like humans, we're waking up to the fact it's like, oh, okay, like, that's not really what it means. And since it doesn't mean that, now just the entire structure collapses. And I would say probably we're getting divorces too soon. And also we're making decisions on spouses too soon or too casually. So it's like, but we can't have that discussion if we don't take the magic out of it, in my opinion.
Sure. I would say this, though, and I do agree. There's something kind of to be said for that, because people can be way too rigid and too literal under those things. But I also, if you look at it as an ideal, I think there is something energizing and beautiful about being like, we're going to attempt. I would love to be together with you forever. Now, if it's like from the beginning of like, I'd maybe like to be together with you forever, then there's like, that's kind of like okay, thanks. Like, that sounds good. So there is something nice, in my opinion, of striving under an ideal. And if you take it literally, obviously it's like, that's crazy. That's nuts. But that is and again, it's a purely man-made ideal. There's no, it does seem like a purely contrived ideal, like we're going to live together forever. It's just like, there is something reassuring. I would say, especially for women too, because it's like to be like, look, man, like I would love nothing more for us to live, together forever. And that is my absolute aim. And I'm genuinely meaning that. But again, there needs to be that other discussion, like, you mustn't make my life a living hell. And it's like, that's like, it's very difficult, but it's like, is it more effective to have the kind of sword dangling over their heads, which might be a dramatic way to put it, but it's like, maybe, or probably, definitely. Yeah. But then it becomes like the only issue is then you enter kids into the equation. And now I'm telling you, it's a whole different beast. Because now it's not, me and you, whatever, but it's like, and I could just be, I'm a bit of somewhat of an overanalyzer, overworrier, but it's like, how does that decision affect the kid? And then like, how much of your happiness is safe to burn off? How much, you know what I mean? It's not clear at all. But I've seen people go both ways of like digging yourself in the trenches. I'm miserable. This is what life is. And then people being like, they'll be fine. And then it's like, that creates problems too. So it's difficult. It is very difficult.
Totally. Well, dude, we'll have to unpack this. You know what? I think we should have Emma on at some point so we can have like a triad discussion about this.
That'd be nice.
If you're down for it, I think it'd be really cool. It'd be really helpful for me, and I think it'd be helpful for the guys as well.
Absolutely.
But dude, I appreciate it. I got to run to the doctors right now, if that's cool.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can have round 2 of this soon.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Later on. See you guys.
Later, guys.